The monsoon descended upon Mumbai like a curtain falling across the world's largest stage. Thunder rolled through the narrow lanes of Andheri, rattling tin roofs and sending streams of water cascading down cracked concrete walls. The city's usual symphony of honking cars and chattering vendors had been replaced by the percussion of rain against metal and the occasional splash of a rickshaw navigating through knee-deep puddles. At the corner of a bustling intersection, where the streetlights cast wavering reflections on wet asphalt, Arjun Mehta ladled steaming dal into a steel bowl with the same precision he'd once reserved for plating dishes in five-star kitchens. His roadside stall, barely 8 feet square with a corrugated iron roof that leaked in 3 places, hummed with the quiet efficiency born of years of practice. The blue tarpaulin walls flapped gently in the wind, and the single bulb hanging overhead swayed like a pendulum, casting dancing shadows across his workspace. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "Papa, the lights are getting dimmer," 10-year-old Anika observed from her perch on an overturned crate, her notebook balanced on her knees. She sketched with the concentrated intensity of an artist, drawing tiny cumin seeds next to a recipe for his famous rajma. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her school uniform, though clean, showed the careful mending of a father who'd learned to thread needles as skillfully as he wielded knives. "The transformer will probably blow soon," Arjun replied, not looking up from the onions sizzling in his pan, "but we have the lanterns ready." A taxi driver hunched under a plastic sheet called out his order, 2 rotis, extra pickle, and Arjun nodded, his movements economical and fluid. Every gesture carried the weight of necessity. There was no room for waste in their world, not of motion, not of ingredients, not of time. The rain drummed harder against the roof, and water began to pool around the edges of the stall despite the careful drainage channels he dug by hand. "Arjun Bhai, this storm has teeth tonight." Rajiv Patel's voice boomed over the rain as he ducked under the shelter, shaking water from his mechanic's coveralls. His broad face split into a grin that hadn't dimmed, despite 43 years of fixing broken engines and broken dreams. "Even the street dogs are hiding." "Business doesn't stop for weather," Arjun replied, though his eyes flickered toward Anika with the protective instinct that never left him. "Neither does hunger." Rajiv studied his friend's profile in the lantern light. The sharp cheekbones that spoke of too many skipped meals so his daughter could eat, the premature lines around eyes that had seen too much loss. "You know, Sonia used to say that life doesn't wait for perfect conditions. She'd be proud of how you've—" The lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the intersection into the warm yellow glow of Arjun's emergency lanterns. The sudden darkness seemed to amplify every sound. The hiss of rain, the distant rumble of thunder, the sizzle of spiced oil in the pan. "There we go," Arjun murmured, adjusting the flame under his largest pot. "Now we cook like our grandmothers did." Anika looked up from her notebook, her eyes bright in the lantern light. "I like it better this way, Papa. It feels more real." Through the curtain of rain, headlights cut erratic patterns as vehicles struggled through the flooded streets. Most were the familiar yellow and black of taxis or the sturdy build of local buses. But one set of lights moved differently, smoother, more expensive. A sleek black SUV lurched and stuttered as it approached the intersection, its engine making sounds that drew Rajiv's professional attention. "Someone's having trouble," the mechanic noted, squinting through the rain. The luxury vehicle came to a halt near their stall, steam rising from its hood. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a man in a crisp white shirt stepped into the downpour, immediately soaked. He moved around to the passenger side and opened the rear door with practiced deference. A woman emerged, tall, elegant even while drenched, her expensive sari clinging to her frame. She surveyed the flooded street with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to solving problems with resources and authority. Behind her, a small figure, a child, coughed wetly in the humid air. "Madam, we should find shelter," the driver called over the rain. "The engine needs to cool, and this flood—" The woman's eyes found Arjun's stall, the only pool of warm light in the darkened street. For a moment, their gazes met across the rain-swept distance, his curious and cautious, hers assessing and slightly desperate. Lightning illuminated the scene in stark detail. a billionaire CEO and a street food cook, separated by more than just the streaming water between them. But the storm, it seemed, had its own plans for the night. Maya Kapoor had negotiated billion-dollar deals in boardrooms across 3 continents, but she had never felt as exposed as she did standing in the Mumbai rain, watching steam rise from her disabled vehicle. Her driver, Karan, emerged from beneath the hood, shaking his head. "The cooling system has failed, madam. We cannot continue until it's repaired." He glanced nervously at the rising water around the wheels. "And this flooding?" Maya's jaw tightened. She had a conference call with investors in New York scheduled for midnight, contracts waiting for her signature, an empire that operated on precision timing. Being stranded was not in her vocabulary. Yet here she stood, designer heels sinking into a puddle, while the rain showed no signs of mercy. "Excuse me," a quiet voice called through the downpour. The man from the food stall had approached, a piece of tarpaulin held over his head. Up close, Maya could see the careful intelligence in his dark eyes, the practiced way he moved despite his simple clothes. "The flooding will get worse before it gets better. Would you like to wait under our roof?" Maya's first instinct was to refuse. She had called for another car, backup transportation, someone who could solve this problem with the efficiency she demanded from her world. But her phone showed no signal, and the sight of the small girl in the stall, coughing softly into her thin sweater, stirred something unexpected in her chest. "Just until our ride arrives," she said curtly, then softened slightly. "Thank you." Arjun led them to his modest shelter, quickly rearranging crates to create seating. The space felt impossibly small, with 4 adults and Anika crowded together, the air thick with the aroma of cumin, coriander, and the indefinable warmth of home cooking. "Please sit," Arjun offered Maya the driest spot, a wooden stool he normally reserved for his own brief breaks. "I can make chai, something warm." "That's not necessary," Maya replied automatically, the phrase worn smooth by years of maintaining distance from those she perceived as beneath her station. But even as she spoke, she found herself studying the organized chaos of his workspace. The gleaming pots, despite their obvious age, the careful arrangement of spices in small glass jars, the way he moved with unconscious grace around the tiny space. Karan accepted the offered seat gratefully, his usual stoic demeanor cracking slightly. "This is very kind, sir. The rain is quite fierce tonight." "Monsoon's been building for days," Arjun replied, already preparing tea with movements so fluid they seemed choreographed. "Mumbai's way of reminding us who's really in charge." Anika looked up from her notebook, her young face bright with curiosity. "Are you important?" she asked Maya with the directness only children possessed. "You have a very fancy car." "Anika," Arjun warned gently, but Maya found herself almost smiling at the child's honesty. "I suppose I am, in some ways," Maya answered carefully. "I run restaurants, many restaurants." "Like Papa," Anika's eyes lit up. "He used to cook in fancy places before." She caught her father's subtle shake of the head and changed direction smoothly. "He makes the best food in all of Mumbai." The chai was ready, served in simple steel glasses that somehow felt more substantial than the bone china Maya was accustomed to. She accepted the cup, noting how Arjun's calloused hands handled it with surprising delicacy. The first sip sent warmth spreading through her chest, not just from the heat, but from something else, something she couldn't immediately name. "This is excellent," she admitted, and meant it. The spices were perfectly balanced, the sweetness subtle rather than cloying. "I haven't had chai like this in years." "Years?" Anika looked scandalized. "But it's the best drink ever. Papa makes it every morning before school and sometimes at night when I have bad dreams about Mama." The innocent words created a moment of awkward silence. Maya caught the flash of pain that crossed Arjun's face, quickly hidden but unmistakable to someone who had learned to read faces across negotiating tables. She found herself curious about this man's story, about the shadows that seemed to live behind his careful composure. "Perhaps some pakoras as well," Arjun offered, already mixing batter with practiced efficiency. "The rain makes everyone hungry." Maya wanted to refuse. She had a strict diet, carefully monitored by nutritionists who calculated every calorie. But the smell of frying onions and chickpea flour filled the small space with such comfort that her resolve wavered. When had she last eaten food that wasn't prepared by her personal chef or served in sterile restaurant settings? Just one, she heard herself say, then felt oddly pleased by Anika's approving nod. The pakora, when it came, was golden and crisp, served on a banana leaf with chutney that made her taste buds sing. Maya bit into it carefully, then with growing appreciation. There was something here her corporate kitchens had lost. Some indefinable quality that turned simple ingredients into something approaching magic. "Why do you look sad like Papa does sometimes?" Anika asked suddenly, her child's perception cutting through pretense with surgical precision. Maya found herself caught off guard, not by the question but by the accuracy of it. When had anyone last asked about her emotional state? When had anyone cared enough to notice? "I suppose," she said slowly, "because running things isn't the same as enjoying them." Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city, but inside the small stall, something warmer than the lantern light had begun to grow. The pakora dissolved on Maya's tongue, and suddenly she wasn't sitting in a roadside stall anymore. She was 8 years old, standing on a wooden stool in her mother's kitchen, while Priya Kapoor patiently guided her small hands through the ritual of mixing batter. The same balance of gram flour and spices, the same gentle sizzle as spoonfuls hit hot oil, the same satisfied nod when the golden spheres emerged perfectly crisp. "Beta, food is not just sustenance," her mother's voice echoed across the decades. "It's memory, it's love, it's the way we tell our children they matter." Maya's eyes filled unexpectedly, and she turned her face slightly away, hoping the lantern light would hide her vulnerability. But Arjun noticed, perhaps because grief had taught him to recognize its presence in others. "Good?" he asked quietly, his tone carrying no presumption, only genuine interest in her response. "It tastes like—" Maya paused, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "Like my childhood. My mother used to make them exactly like this." Arjun nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. He turned back to his cooking, giving her the privacy to compose herself, while his hands moved through a familiar dance. Onions into the pan, ginger garlic paste releasing its aromatic steam, tomatoes breaking down into the foundation of something larger. "Mama taught Papa that recipe," Anika piped up, unaware of the emotional currents flowing around her. She held up her notebook, showing a carefully drawn pakora surrounded by tiny ingredient sketches. She said every recipe tells a story. "Your mother was wise," Maya said softly, then caught herself. She rarely engaged in personal conversation with strangers. Yet something about this rain-enclosed space seemed to dissolve the usual barriers. Arjun's hands stilled for just a moment at the mention of his wife. In that pause, Maya glimpsed the depth of his loss. Not the dramatic grief of movies, but the quiet, persistent ache of someone who had reorganized his entire life around an absence. She was, he agreed. Sonia believed that cooking without love was just chemistry. The recipe might be perfect, but the soul would be missing. As if summoned by her name, the memory of Sonia seemed to fill the small space. Maya could almost see her, a woman who had understood that the secret ingredient in every memorable meal was the care with which it was prepared. It was a philosophy Maya's restaurants had lost somewhere in their expansion, from dozens to hundreds to thousands of locations worldwide. "Here, Auntie, look at this one!" Anika scooted closer, her notebook open to a page covered with elaborate drawings. "This is Papa's special doll. See how I drew the cumin seeds? And this squiggly thing is supposed to be the asafoetida, but it's hard to draw smells." Maya found herself genuinely charmed by the child's earnest artistic efforts. Each page revealed a catalog of love, not just recipes, but observations about her father's techniques, little notes about which dishes made him smile, questions about ingredients she'd never seen before. "You're quite the artist," Maya observed. "And these notes, you really watch your father cook." "Every day," Anika beamed. "He says when I'm older, he'll teach me everything. But some things I already know, like you have to stir clockwise for good luck, and you should always taste the food before you serve it, because how can you share something if you don't know how it makes people feel?" From the mouths of babes, Maya thought. When was the last time she had tasted the food in her restaurants? When had she stopped caring how it made people feel, focusing instead on profit margins and market expansion? Thunder crashed overhead, rattling the tin roof and sending a fresh cascade of water through one of the leaks. Arjun smoothly repositioned a bucket to catch the drip, never breaking the rhythm of his cooking. Maya watched him adapt to the inconvenience with such natural grace that she found herself envying his acceptance of imperfection. "The storm's getting worse," Karan observed, checking his phone for the third time in 10 minutes. "The roads may not clear until morning, madam." Maya's stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Control was her currency, precision her religion. Being trapped anywhere, especially somewhere without her usual resources, triggered every corporate survival instinct she possessed. Yet as she looked around the modest stall, at Arjun's calm competence, at Anika's innocent contentment, at the simple beauty of a meal being prepared with absolute attention, she found her panic oddly muted. "Papa, I'm getting sleepy," Anika murmured, rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand. The combination of warm food, steady rain, and the late hour was taking its toll on the 10-year-old. Arjun immediately set down his ladle and knelt beside his daughter. "Here, Beta," he said, wrapping his own shawl around her thin shoulders. "Rest a little." The tenderness in that simple gesture hit Maya like a physical blow. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had shown her such uncomplicated care, couldn't recall when she had last received affection that asked for nothing in return. Her throat tightened as she watched Anika curl up against her father's side, safe in the absolute certainty of his love. The rain continued its relentless assault on the city, but inside the small stall, Maya found herself in the presence of something she had forgotten existed, a family bound not by corporate necessity or social advantage, but by the simple, revolutionary act of caring for each other without condition. And for the first time in years, she wondered what her mother would think of the woman she had become. The rain showed no mercy as midnight approached, drumming against the tin roof with increasing ferocity. Water had begun to pool deeper in the streets, transforming familiar intersections into treacherous rivers that swallowed streetlights whole. In the warm cocoon of Arjun's stall, the three adults sat in companionable silence while Anika dozed fitfully against her father's shoulder. Maya found herself studying Arjun's face in the flickering lantern light, the way his eyes softened when they fell on his daughter, the careful way he adjusted his shawl around her small frame without waking her. There was something in his tenderness that spoke of practice born from necessity, of a man who had learned to be both mother and father in the space where another's love used to live. "She's beautiful," Maya said quietly, surprising herself with the observation. "She has your eyes, but there's something else." "Her mother's spirit," Arjun replied without hesitation. "Sonia had this way of seeing wonder in everything. Anika inherited that gift." His voice carried the weight of 3 years of grief, carefully controlled, but never fully healed. "She was only 7 when we lost her mother. Sometimes I watch her draw those recipes and wonder if she remembers enough." The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with the kind of loss that reshapes everything that comes after. Maya felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of pain that transcended their vastly different circumstances. "How did it happen?" she asked, then immediately regretted the intrusion. "I'm sorry, that's not my place to ask." Arjun was quiet for so long that Maya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, as if the words themselves were fragile things that might break if handled roughly. "Heart failure. Sudden," they said. "No warning, no time to prepare." His hand unconsciously stroked Anika's hair. One morning she was making her famous cardamom tea, singing while she worked. By evening she was gone. Just gone. Maya had attended dozens of funerals in her corporate life. Colleagues, competitors, business partners, but she had never heard loss described with such quiet devastation. In her world, grief was scheduled, managed, overcome with efficiency. This was something else entirely. A wound that had been carefully tended but never fully healed. "I was training under Chef Raghavan at the Taj then," Arjun continued, his voice growing stronger, as if sharing the story helped distribute its weight. 15-hour days, working toward my own restaurant. Sonia used to joke that I loved those kitchens more than I loved her. His laugh was hollow. After she died, I couldn't cook for strangers anymore. Every dish felt like a betrayal of her memory. "So you started the stall," Maya said, understanding beginning to dawn. For Anika, she needed stability, needed her father present, not chasing some dream in a kitchen that might never welcome him anyway. Arjun's eyes met Maya's across the small space. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice." whether settling for small and safe was courage or cowardice. The honesty in his confession struck Maya like a physical blow. She recognized something of herself in his words, the way success and sacrifice became indistinguishable, how the pursuit of security could become its own kind of prison. "I lost my family too," she heard herself say, the words emerging before her usual filters could stop them. "Not to death, but to choices. My brother, my cousins, friends who couldn't compete with board meetings and quarterly reports." Arjun's attention focused on her with quiet intensity, and Maya realized she had his complete presence in a way that felt both foreign and necessary. "I built my empire from my father's 3 restaurants," she continued, her voice growing steadier. 47 countries now, over 2,000 locations. Every business magazine calls it a success story. She paused, watching rainwater trace intricate patterns down the tarpaulin walls. "But I eat most of my meals alone. I have employees, not friends. And I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me simply because they wanted to see me nourished." The silence that followed wasn't awkward but contemplative, 2 people recognizing themselves in each other's shadows. Outside, thunder rolled across the city like a conversation between giants, while inside the stall, smaller truths were being exchanged. "Do you ever think about going back?" Maya asked. "To the kitchens, I mean." Arjun looked down at his sleeping daughter, her small hand curled trustingly in his. "Every day. But wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it are different things entirely." "Yes," Maya whispered, thinking of all the relationships she had sacrificed on the altar of achievement. "They are." Annika stirred in her sleep, murmuring something inaudible before settling deeper into her father's embrace. The sight of such uncomplicated trust made Maya's throat tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Not envy, exactly, but a profound sense of something missing from her own carefully constructed existence. "She's lucky to have you," Maya said softly. "I'm the lucky one," Arjun replied. "She reminds me every day that love is the only wealth that multiplies when you share it." Outside, lightning illuminated the flooded streets in stark detail, revealing a city transformed by nature's power. But inside the modest stall, 2 wounded souls were discovering that sometimes the most unexpected shelters hold exactly what you need to heal. "We should eat properly," Arjun announced as the clock in a nearby shop chimed 1 in the morning. The sound drifted through the rain like a gentle reminder that time continued its march, even when the world felt suspended. Real food, not just snacks. Maya started to protest. She had eaten more in the past few hours than she typically consumed in an entire day, but something in Arjun's tone suggested this was less about hunger and more about ritual. She watched as he moved around the small space with renewed purpose, gathering ingredients with the careful consideration of an artist selecting colors for a masterpiece. "I don't usually eat this late," she said, though even as the words left her mouth she realized how hollow they sounded. When did she usually eat? Between meetings, standing at her office window, or during working dinners where conversation focused on market penetration rather than flavor. "The best meals happen when we abandon our usual rules," Arjun replied, his hands already working, ginger being grated, onions sliced with mathematical precision, spices measured by some internal compass that required no scales. "Sonia used to say that hunger has its own clock, and it's rarely synchronized with convention." Annika stirred at the sound of activity, her eyes opening to the familiar comfort of her father's cooking. "Are you making the special rice, Papa?" she asked hopefully, sleep still thick in her voice. "Pulao," Arjun confirmed, and Maya caught the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth. "With extra cashews, just how you like it." Maya found herself drawn into the rhythm of preparation despite herself. When Arjun needed space to move around the tiny cooking area, she instinctively shifted to give him room. When Anika's notebook slipped from her small hands, Maya caught it without thinking, her eyes scanning the careful drawings of star anise and bay leaves. "You draw very well," Maya observed, studying a particularly detailed sketch of what appeared to be a biryani pot. "This could be in a cookbook." "Really?" Anika's face lit up with pure delight. "Papa always says my pictures are good, but parents have to say nice things. You don't have to, so you must mean it." The child's logic was so sound that Maya found herself laughing, a genuine sound that surprised her with its warmth. "I wouldn't lie about art. This is beautiful work." Karan, who had been quietly maintaining his professional distance, accepted a cup of fresh chai with visible gratitude. Maya noticed how naturally Arjun included her driver in the circle of hospitality, never treating him as invisible furniture the way most of her social circle did. "Sir, this storm is the worst I've seen in 15 years of driving," Karan offered. "The radio says the airport is closed, railways suspended. The whole city is holding its breath." "Mumbai knows how to wait," Arjun replied, stirring the rice with gentle, circular motions. "The monsoon teaches patience whether we want to learn it or not." The aroma that began to fill the small space was complex and welcoming. Cumin and cardamom, bay leaves and saffron, all harmonizing into something that made Maya's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. This wasn't the precisely calibrated flavor profiles of her restaurants, engineered for broad appeal and consistent reproduction. This was something else entirely. Cooking as communication, food as love made tangible. "Maya Auntie," Anika said suddenly, using the familiar address with the casual intimacy that only children possessed. "Do you have a family?" The question hung in the air like incense, both innocent and penetrating. Maya found herself caught between her instinct for privacy and an unexpected desire to be honest with this perceptive child. "Not anymore," she said finally. "I have employees, business partners, people who work for me. But not family, not the way you and your papa are family." "That sounds lonely," Anika observed with devastating simplicity. "Yes," Maya admitted, surprised by her own honesty, "it is." "You could eat with us more often," the child suggested with the matter-of-fact problem-solving of someone who hadn't yet learned that adult complications couldn't always be fixed with shared meals. "Papa cooks for everyone who's hungry, don't you, Papa?" Arjun's response was gentle but weighted with awareness of the distances between their worlds. "Everyone is welcome at our table, Beta, but Auntie Maya has a very important job, many responsibilities." "More important than being happy?" Anika asked, and Maya felt the question hit her like a carefully aimed arrow. Before she could formulate an answer, Rajiv's voice boomed through the rain-soaked night. "Arjun, are you feeding half of Mumbai in this storm?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The mechanic appeared in the stall's entrance, water streaming from his jacket, his broad grin undiminished by the weather. He took in the scene, the elegantly dressed woman sitting cross-legged on a wooden crate, the expensive car parked nearby, the smell of saffron rice filling the air, and his eyebrows rose in amused appreciation. "Well, well," Rajiv said, accepting the towel Arjun offered. "Hosting VIP guests tonight, are we? And here I thought you were just a simple food wala." "Just sharing what we have," Arjun replied, but Maya caught the slight tension in his shoulders. The way his friend's joking words seemed to remind him of the vast gulf between his modest offering and her privileged world. "This simple food wallah," Maya said clearly, looking directly at Rajiv, "cooks better than most of the chefs in my restaurants." The statement surprised everyone, including herself. But as the words hung in the air, Maya realized they were absolutely true. There was something in Arjun's cooking that her empire had lost in its pursuit of efficiency and scale, something that couldn't be quantified in profit margins or customer satisfaction surveys. "You have restaurants?" Rajiv asked, his protective instincts clearly activated. "A few," Maya replied with characteristic understatement, then caught Anika's knowing look. "More than a few, actually." The rice was ready, served in simple steel bowls that somehow made each grain seem precious. Maya took her first bite and closed her eyes involuntarily. The flavors were perfectly balanced, each spice distinct yet harmonious, the texture achieving that perfect space between tender and firm that separated good cooks from true artists. "This," she said quietly, "is extraordinary." And in that moment, sitting in a roadside stall at 1 in the morning, eating rice from a steel bowl while rain drummed overhead, Maya Kapoor tasted something that all her success had failed to provide: the irreplaceable flavor of being genuinely welcomed home. The rain had settled into a steady, hypnotic rhythm when conversation turned to work. Rajiv, his natural curiosity undimmed by fatigue, had been studying Maya with the shrewd assessment of someone who understood that people revealed themselves through their relationship with money and power. "So, these restaurants of yours," he said, settling back against a sack of rice. "Family business?" Maya hesitated, recognizing the crossroads moment. She could deflect, minimize, maintain the comfortable fiction that she was simply someone with a modest connection to the food industry. But sitting in this small space, surrounded by authentic warmth and genuine curiosity, the weight of her usual pretenses felt suddenly unbearable. "In a way," she said carefully, "my father started with 3 restaurants in Delhi, traditional fare, mostly. He believed food should tell the story of where it came from." "And now?" Arjun asked, though something in his tone suggested he sensed the complexity beneath her simple words. Maya drew a slow breath, steeling herself for the moment when their careful intimacy might shatter against the reality of who she actually was. "Now we operate in 47 countries, over 2,000 locations, the Kapoor Restaurant Group." The silence that followed was profound and telling. Rajiv's eyes widened in recognition. Even a neighborhood mechanic knew that name, had seen the sleek logos spreading across Mumbai's skyline like a corporate constellation. Anika looked confused, but intrigued, while Karan straightened with the realization that his employer's casual evening had become something far more significant. But it was Arjun's reaction that cut deepest. Maya watched his face cycle through surprise, understanding, and then something harder. A careful closing down, like shutters being drawn across windows that had been briefly, vulnerably open. "The Kapoor Group," he repeated, his voice now carrying the weight of recognition. "I know that name. You're the one who's been buying up local restaurants across the city, converting them to fast casual chains." "We're expanding market reach, yes," Maya replied, hearing how corporate and bloodless the words sounded in this space where food was still prepared with love rather than efficiency targets. "Market reach." Arjun's laugh was bitter, unlike anything she'd heard from him before. "Is that what you call it when you erase a family's legacy and replace it with assembly line cooking?" "Papa," Anika said softly, sensing the shift in mood with a child's intuitive radar. But Arjun was past tempering his words for politeness. 3 years of swallowed frustrations, of watching corporate giants devour the neighborhood establishments that had once been Mumbai's soul, suddenly found their voice. "Do you know Shanti Uncle's place in Bandra?" he asked, his eyes fixed on Maya's face. 40 years he spent perfecting his grandmother's curry recipes. 40 years of knowing his customers, names, their families, their preferences. Last month, your people offered him money he couldn't refuse for a space he couldn't afford to keep. Maya felt her chest tighten. She remembered the acquisition, a minor property deal that had been handled by her development team, barely worthy of her personal attention. "Business decisions aren't personal." "Everything about food is personal," Arjun interrupted, his composure finally cracking. "Every dish carries someone's history, someone's love, someone's story. But you've turned cooking into commodity production. Do you even remember what real food tastes like?" The accusation hung between them like a blade. Maya found herself caught between her instinct to defend her empire's success and a growing awareness that his words contained uncomfortable truths. "I built something substantial," she said finally. "I created jobs, brought Indian cuisine to the world stage, gave hundreds of chefs opportunities they never would have had otherwise. Opportunities to cook from your standardized recipes, to measure spices by corporate guidelines rather than taste and tradition." Arjun's voice was quiet now, but no less cutting. "That's not opportunity, that's erasure." "Papa," Anika said again, more urgently. She moved to his side, her small hand finding his arm. "Remember what Mama used to say about angry words? They're like salt in dough. Once you add too much, you can't take it back." The child's intervention created a moment of suspended tension. Maya watched Arjun's face soften as he looked down at his daughter, his anger tempered by love but not extinguished. "You're right, Beta," he said quietly. "Mama was always right about these things. But the damage was done. The careful intimacy they had built over the evening lay fractured between them, replaced by the familiar distance between corporate power and those who lived in its shadow." Maya felt the walls she had briefly allowed to lower reassembling themselves, her professional armor clicking back into place. "I should check on the car," Karan said diplomatically, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "It won't be running tonight," Rajiv observed bluntly. "Roads are flooded." and that cooling system needs proper repair. Morning, at the earliest. The prospect of remaining trapped together until dawn suddenly felt less like an adventure and more like an endurance test. Maya found herself studying Arjun's profile, noting how his jaw remained tight even as he tried to soften his demeanor for his daughter's sake. "I didn't choose to be born into my circumstances any more than you chose yours," Maya said quietly. "But I've tried to honor my father's legacy while building something that could survive in a global economy." "Survival and soul aren't the same thing," Arjun replied without looking at her. "Your father's 3 restaurants probably fed more hearts than your 2,000 locations ever will." The words stung because they echoed thoughts Maya had been trying to suppress for years, late-night doubts about whether expansion had been vision or simply ambition wearing a prettier mask. Anka, wise beyond her years, moved between the adults with the determined diplomacy of someone who had learned to navigate adult storms. "Papa, you always say food brings people together. And Maya auntie said my drawings were beautiful and she didn't have to say that." The child's simple logic hung in the air, a reminder that their shared humanity was more fundamental than their different circumstances. But as the rain continued its relentless assault on the city, Maya wondered if some distances were simply too vast to bridge, even with the best intentions and the most perfect rice. Outside, Mumbai slept under its blanket of monsoon fury, while inside a small roadside stall, 2 people discovered that sometimes the most honest conversations begin with the most painful truths. The hours after midnight stretched like pulled taffy, thick with unspoken tensions and the relentless percussion of rain against tin. Anika had finally surrendered to exhaustion, curled beneath her father's shawl, with the complete trust that only children possess. Rajiv had departed with promises to return at dawn with news of the roads, leaving Maya, Arjun, and the sleeping child in a silence that felt both intimate and fragile. Maya found sleep impossible. The wooden crate that served as her makeshift bed was unforgiving, but discomfort wasn't what kept her awake. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Arjun's face when he'd spoken about Shanti Uncle's restaurant, the way his features had hardened with a pain that went deeper than professional disagreement. She had built her empire on the premise that progress sometimes required difficult choices, but she had never had to look into the eyes of those who paid the price for her expansion. Near 3 in the morning, she gave up the pretense of rest and carefully made her way to the stall's entrance, where the tarpaulin created a small alcove overlooking the flooded street. The rain had softened to a steady whisper, and Mumbai lay beneath its silver shroud like a sleeping giant. The familiar city lights were mostly extinguished, leaving only the occasional glow of emergency lighting or the sweep of headlights from some brave soul navigating the treacherous roads. "Can't sleep either?" Arjun's voice came from behind her, quiet enough not to disturb his daughter. Maya turned to find him settling beside her on the small ledge, his own shawl wrapped around his shoulders. In the dim light, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, not just from the long night, but from carrying burdens that went far beyond physical weariness. "I keep thinking about what you said," Maya admitted, "about Shanti Uncle. I didn't know his story." "There are thousands of stories you don't know," Arjun replied, but his tone lacked the earlier edge. "That's the problem with seeing the world from a boardroom. People become statistics. Communities become market opportunities." Maya felt the urge to defend herself, to explain the complexities of running a global enterprise, the impossible balance between growth and preservation. Instead, she found herself saying, "Tell me about him." About Shanti Uncle. Arjun was quiet for a long moment, watching water cascade from the roof edge like a curtain between them and the rest of the world. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of memory and loss. He started with a cart, like many of us. Saved every rupee for 15 years to afford that small space in Bandra. His mutton curry was legendary. People would travel across the city just to taste it. But more than that, he remembered things. Your name, your family troubles, whether you preferred extra chilies or less salt. He made everyone feel seen. What will happen to him now? Your company's offer came with a relocation package, a food court stall in a mall, cooking from your standardized recipes. Arjun's laugh held no humor. He'll survive, but the man who knew how to read hunger in someone's eyes and feed their soul? That man is gone forever. The weight of unintended consequences settled over Maya like a heavy blanket. She had always prided herself on being a responsible leader, ensuring her acquisitions were fair and beneficial to all parties. But fairness measured in rupees was different from fairness measured in dreams. "I never wanted to destroy anything," she said quietly. "I thought I was building bridges, bringing traditional flavors to new audiences." "Maybe you were," Arjun conceded, "but bridges work both ways. What came back to the traditions you were supposedly honoring?" Maya had no answer for that. Her restaurant served Indian-inspired cuisine to global palates, modified for broader appeal and operational efficiency. The connection to authenticity had been severed somewhere in the translation from grandmother's kitchen to corporate standardization. "I used to cook with my mother," she found herself confessing. "Before business school, before the expansion plans, before I learned to think about food as units moved and profit margins. She taught me that every spice had a purpose, every technique had a story. What happened to that knowledge?" "I hired consultants to preserve it," Maya said, hearing the hollow irony in her own words. "Food scientists who could replicate traditional flavors with modern efficiency. I thought I was being smart, protecting our heritage while making it scalable." "But you stopped cooking yourself." It wasn't a question, and Maya didn't treat it as one. The truth was that she couldn't remember the last time she had prepared a meal with her own hands, had tasted and adjusted seasoning by instinct rather than following a tested formula. "Success has its own gravity," she said finally. "The higher you climb, the harder it becomes to remember what the ground feels like." Arjun studied her profile in the pale light filtering through the rain. "Is it worth it? Everything you've built, if it cost you the ability to find joy in the thing you're supposed to love?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Maya found herself thinking about her corner office 40 floors above Mumbai, about the meals eaten at her desk while reviewing acquisition reports, about the restaurants that bore her family name but had forgotten her family's heart. "I don't know," she whispered, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "I thought I was building something meaningful, something that would last. But sitting here tonight, tasting food made with actual love rather than market research, I'm not sure I know the difference anymore." "Between what?" "Between success and just being very good at accumulating things." The silence that followed was different from their earlier tension, softer, more honest. Rain continued its patient work of washing the city clean, and Maya found herself wondering if it was possible to wash away the accumulated distance between intention and impact, between the person she had been and the empire she had become. "I envy you," she said suddenly. "Me?" Arjun's surprise was genuine. "You envy a man who makes rice and dal from a roadside stall?" "I envy a man who still remembers why he started cooking, who can look at his daughter and know that every meal he makes is an act of love rather than commerce." Maya's voice grew steadier as she spoke. "I have 2,000 restaurants, but I eat alone. You have 8 square feet and a leaking roof, but you have a family." "Family isn't about blood or space," Arjun said quietly. "It's about showing up, day after day, and caring enough to keep trying." "When did you last try something that scared you?" The question caught Arjun off guard. He looked toward his sleeping daughter, then back at Maya. "Every day I don't pursue what I really want to do. Every day I choose safety over possibility." "And what do you really want to do?" "Cook for people who understand that food is more than fuel. Create something beautiful and meaningful and temporary and perfect." His voice carried a longing that made Maya's chest tighten. But wanting and daring are different things entirely. They sat in comfortable silence as dawn approached, two people who had built their lives around different forms of safety, discovering that both success and survival could become their own kinds of prisons. Outside, Mumbai began to stir beneath its blanket of rain, and Maya wondered if it was possible to find a path back to the person she had been before ambition became her only compass. The storm was beginning to clear, but the real weather was just beginning to change. Anika stirred as the first pale hints of dawn filtered through the gray curtain of rain, her small voice cutting through the contemplative silence that had settled over the adults. "Papa," she murmured, sitting up and rubbing sleep from her eyes, "I had the dream about Mama again. The one where she's making hot chocolate and singing that song about the rain." Arjun immediately moved to his daughter's side, his face softening with the particular tenderness reserved for a child's vulnerable moments. "The dream where she teaches you to add cardamom at just the right time?" "Yes," Anika nodded, her voice still thick with sleep and memory. But this time, she said I should ask you to make it for real. She said sharing the recipe makes it stronger. Maya watched this exchange with something approaching wonder. In her world, recipes were intellectual property, carefully guarded secrets that provided competitive advantage. Here, they were inheritance, love made tangible, and passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. "It's almost morning, Beta," Arjun said gently. "And we have a guest. Perhaps hot chocolate isn't." "Please, Papa?" Anika's eyes found Maya's across the small space. "Maya, Auntie has been sad like you get sometimes. Mama's hot chocolate always helped when you had the thinking too much face." The child's perceptive observation hit both adults with unexpected force. Maya found herself curious about this recipe that could apparently cure the thinking too much face, a condition she was intimately familiar with, but had never heard diagnosed so accurately. "I don't want to intrude on something so personal," Maya said softly, but even as she spoke, she realized how much she wanted to be included in this small ritual. "Mama always said food is only personal when you keep it to yourself," Anika replied with the wisdom that sometimes emerged from children when adults least expected it. "When you share it, it becomes a gift." Arjun looked between his daughter and Maya, something shifting in his expression. The anger from earlier had faded, replaced by a different kind of consideration. "It's not a complicated recipe," he said finally, "but it requires patience." "I have time," Maya replied, though as the words left her mouth, she realized they were more than polite conversation. For the first time in years, she genuinely had nowhere else to be, nothing more urgent than learning how a grieving father honored his late wife's memory through cocoa and spice. Arjun moved to his supply corner with familiar efficiency, gathering ingredients that seemed impossibly simple for something Anika described with such reverence. Milk, dark chocolate, cardamom pods, a touch of jaggery, and something else he handled with particular care, a small jar filled with what appeared to be crushed rose petals. "Sonia's secret ingredient," he explained, noticing Maya's curiosity. "She said chocolate was about comfort, but roses were about hope. The combination created something that could heal both body and spirit." As he began to heat the milk, Arjun's movements took on the quality of ritual. Every gesture was deliberate, meditative, as if the act of preparation was as important as the final result. Maya found herself drawn into the rhythm of his work, watching how he crushed cardamom pods between his fingers, testing the temperature of milk with the back of his hand, adding chocolate in small pieces that melted like secrets dissolving in trust. "The timing is everything," he murmured, more to himself than to his audience. "Too fast, and the chocolate seizes. Too slow, and the cardamom becomes bitter. Sonia said it was like love. You had to pay attention every moment, adjust as needed, never take your focus away." "She sounds wise," Maya observed, watching steam rise from the pot in fragrant spirals. "She saw connections other people missed," Arjun replied. How the way someone stirred a pot revealed their approach to life. How sharing a meal was really sharing trust. How recipes were just the beginning. The real magic happened in the love you brought to the cooking. Anika had positioned herself where she could observe every detail, her notebook open to a fresh page. But instead of drawing ingredients, Maya noticed, she was sketching the expressions on her father's face as he worked. The concentration, the gentle smile that appeared when he spoke of her mother, the way his shoulders relaxed into the familiar rhythm of creation. "Now the roses," Arjun said, adding the dried petals with careful precision. "Just a pinch." Sonia said too much made it taste like perfume. Too little, and you missed the magic entirely. The aroma that filled the small space was unlike anything Maya had experienced in her corporate taste testing sessions. This was comfort made manifest, warmth that seemed to emanate not just from the heated milk, but from something deeper. The accumulated love of hundreds of mornings when this recipe had been a bridge between sleep and waking, between sorrow and hope. "Would you like to learn?" Arjun asked suddenly, offering Maya the wooden spoon he'd been using to stir. The invitation felt significant beyond its simplicity. Maya moved to the small cooking area, accepting the spoon with hands that were steadier than she had expected. Under Arjun's gentle guidance, she learned the proper circular motion, the way to read the milk's temperature through tiny bubbles that formed at the edges, the moment when chocolate and spice achieved perfect harmony. "It's about attention," Arjun said quietly, his hand briefly covering hers to adjust her stirring technique. "Not just following steps, but being present for each moment of transformation." Maya found herself thinking about her restaurants, where recipes were executed by thousands of cooks who had never met the person who created them, who followed instructions without understanding the story behind each measurement. This was something else entirely. Cooking as meditation, as remembrance, as love made visible. "Now we serve," Anika announced solemnly, producing 3 steel cups that had been warmed by the cooking fire. Mama always said hot chocolate should be drunk while it's still dreaming of being perfect. The first sip was revelation. The chocolate was rich but not overwhelming, the cardamom providing warmth without dominance, the roses adding a subtle complexity that made Maya want to close her eyes and simply exist in the moment. But more than flavor, she tasted story, a woman's love for her family, distilled into something that could be shared across time and loss. "This is extraordinary," Maya said, and meant it completely. "It's just hot chocolate," Arjun replied, but his eyes showed pleasure at her response. "No," Maya said firmly, looking directly at him. "This is legacy. This is what I've been trying to capture in my restaurants and failing to understand. It's not about the recipe itself. It's about the reason behind it, the story it carries, the love that created it." Anika beamed with the satisfaction of someone whose favorite secret had been properly appreciated. "Papa, Maya auntie understands. She gets why Mama's recipes are special." As they sat together in the pre-dawn quiet, sharing warmth and story and the simple pleasure of something perfectly made, Maya felt a shift in her understanding of what she had been trying to build all these years. Success wasn't about scale or efficiency or market dominance. It was about this. The moment when strangers became family through the simple act of caring enough to share what mattered most. Outside, Mumbai was beginning to wake, but inside the small stall, 3 people were discovering that the most important recipes couldn't be standardized, only treasured and passed along with the kind of attention that turned ingredients into inheritance. The rain had finally gentled to a whisper when Karan appeared at the stall's entrance, his usually immaculate uniform wrinkled from the long night, but his professional demeanor intact. Behind him, the first pale light of dawn revealed a city transformed, streets still flooded but beginning to drain, the air washed clean and carrying the scent of wet earth and new possibilities. "The car is running, madam," he reported quietly, mindful of the intimate scene before him, Maya sitting cross-legged on a wooden crate, sharing hot chocolate with a street vendor and his daughter as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "The roads are still difficult, but passable now." Maya felt something clench in her chest at his words. Throughout the storm, the idea of rescue had seemed abstract, hypothetical. Now, faced with the reality of return to her structured world, she found herself reluctant to leave this small sanctuary where she had tasted something she hadn't known she was missing. "Thank you, Karan," she said, but made no move to gather her things. Arjun was studying her face with the careful attention he brought to testing seasoning, reading subtle changes in expression the way he might detect the moment when cumin released its true fragrance. "Your empire awaits," he said quietly, though his tone carried no sarcasm, only a kind of gentle recognition. "Yes," Maya replied, but the word felt hollow. "Board meetings, quarterly reports, strategic planning sessions." She paused, looking around the small stall that had become a world unto itself. All the things that seemed so urgent yesterday. Anika had been unusually quiet since Karan's arrival, her notebook clutched in her small hands. Now she looked up at Maya with the serious expression of someone preparing to say something important. "Maya auntie," she began, her voice careful and formal in the way children adopted when addressing weighty matters. "Are you going to forget about us when you go back to your important life?" The question hit Maya like a physical blow. In her world, encounters were transactional, relationships maintained for their utility. The idea that this child might worry about being forgotten struck her as both heartbreaking and revelatory. "Never," Maya said firmly, surprised by the intensity of her own response. "How could I forget the most perfect hot chocolate in Mumbai? Or the most talented recipe artist I've ever met?" Anika's face brightened, but her expression remained thoughtful. "Papa says forgetting isn't about memory. It's about whether you let something change you or just go back to being the same person you were before." Maya glanced at Arjun, recognizing the source of this wisdom. "Your father is very wise." "He's also scared," Anika said with the blunt honesty that only children could deploy without cruelty. He has dreams about cooking in real restaurants again, but he's afraid they'll disappear like Mama did. Arjun's face flushed with embarrassment and something deeper, the exposure of carefully guarded vulnerabilities. Annika, that's not for you to share with our guest. But Maya was already moving, a decision crystallizing in her mind with the clarity that sometimes emerged from the most unexpected moments. She reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, but instead of simply offering it, she took Annika's pencil and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal number," she said, handing the card to Arjun. "Not my office, not my assistant, me." Arjun accepted the card but looked confused. "I don't understand." "I have a proposition," Maya said, her voice gaining strength as the idea took fuller shape. "I want to offer you something, but not what you might expect." She stood, pacing the small confines of the stall, as her mind raced through possibilities, obstacles, the kind of complex logistics that had built her empire but had never felt as important as they did in this moment. "My company is opening a flagship restaurant in the heart of Mumbai, not a chain location, not a standardized format, but something special. A place meant to showcase the soul of Indian cuisine to the world." She turned to face Arjun directly. "I want you to be the head chef." The silence that followed was profound. Karan's eyebrows rose in professional surprise, while Annika looked between her father and Maya with growing excitement. But it was Arjun's expression that Maya watched most carefully, the war between hope and fear playing out across his features like weather patterns on a landscape. "That's very generous," he said finally, "but I can't. I have responsibilities here. Annika needs stability, needs me present and available. I can't risk failure again." "Who said anything about risk?" Maya replied. "I'm offering you complete creative control, your menu, your techniques, your vision. And more than that, I want you to teach my other chefs what you've taught me tonight. That food is story, that recipes carry love, that cooking is about connection before it's about commerce." "Papa," Annika whispered, her eyes bright with possibility. "This is like the dreams you have, isn't it, about cooking for people who understand?" Arjun looked down at his daughter, then back at Maya. "Even if I wanted to, and I'm not saying I do, I can't abandon my responsibilities. Annika needs to see her father pursue his dreams," Maya interrupted gently. "She needs to know that love and ambition aren't mutually exclusive, that it's possible to honor the past while building something new. But if it fails, you'll have tried, and trying with purpose is different from taking blind risks." Maya's voice softened. "I'm not asking you to abandon your life here. I'm asking you to expand it. To show the world what I tasted tonight, what cooking looks like when it comes from the heart instead of a formula." Annika had been sketching frantically in her notebook throughout this exchange. Now she turned it toward the adults, revealing a drawing of a large restaurant with her father's name above the door, and little hearts floating around the building like stars. "I already drew it," she said simply, "just in case you decided to be brave." Arjun stared at his daughter's artwork, his resistance crumbling in the face of her unwavering faith. Maya watched the moment of transformation, recognizing the instant when fear yielded to possibility. "There would be conditions," he said slowly. "My way of cooking, my respect for ingredients and tradition, no shortcuts, no compromises for efficiency." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Maya replied. "And Annika comes with me. I won't be separated from my daughter for this or anything else." "She can have her own corner in the kitchen," Maya said, smiling at the child. "Every great restaurant needs an official recipe artist." Arjun looked around the small stall that had been his refuge and his prison, then at his daughter's hopeful face, then finally at Maya. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision and the lightness of possibility. "When do we start?" As the first real sunlight of the new day broke through the clouds, Maya felt something shift in her chest, not just about this unexpected partnership, but about the empire she had built and the person she wanted to become within it. Sometimes the most important business decisions weren't made in boardrooms, but in roadside stalls, overshared hot chocolate, and the courage to believe that success could be measured in more than numbers. The storm had ended, but the real transformation was just beginning. 3 months later, Maya stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the evening rush hour paint Mumbai's streets in streams of light. The monsoon had returned, as it always did, but this time she found herself welcoming the rain rather than cursing the delays it brought to her carefully scheduled life. Something fundamental had shifted that night in the roadside stall, something that had rippled through every aspect of her empire in ways both subtle and profound. Her phone buzzed with a text from Arjun. "First service tonight. Anika insists you must be here for the blessing of the kitchen. She says Mama's recipes need proper witnesses." Maya smiled, already reaching for her jacket. 6 months ago, she would have sent regrets, citing board obligations or strategic planning sessions. Tonight, she canceled a conference call with her Singapore team without a second thought. Some things, she had learned, were more important than quarterly projections. The flagship restaurant occupied a restored heritage building in Bandra, its colonial architecture providing a perfect frame for the vision Arjun had slowly, carefully brought to life. Where Maya's other locations featured sleek, standardized designs optimized for quick service and maximum turnover, this space breathed with warmth and intention. Hand-painted tiles told stories of spice routes and family traditions. Copper pots gleamed from open shelves, each one seasoned by use rather than merely decorative. The open kitchen allowed diners to witness the artistry of preparation, transforming cooking from hidden process to shared celebration. Maya entered through the service entrance, a habit she'd developed during the months of preparation. She preferred to see the restaurant through Arjun's eyes first, from the heart outward, rather than approaching it as a customer or corporate executive. "Maya Auntie!" Anika's voice rang out across the kitchen, the child's excitement infectious despite the pre-service tension that always filled professional kitchens. She had grown in the past 3 months, not just physically but in confidence and purpose. Her notebook had evolved too, from simple sketches to detailed documentation of every recipe, every technique, every story that made their food meaningful rather than merely profitable. "How are you feeling, Beta?" Maya asked, accepting the tight hug that had become their ritual greeting. "Nervous and excited and proud all mixed together," Anika replied with characteristic honesty. "Like when you eat something spicy and sweet at the same time and can't decide if you like it but know you want more." Maya laughed, amazed as always by the child's ability to find perfect metaphors for complex emotions. "That sounds exactly right." Arjun emerged from the spice room, his chef's whites pristine, but his face showing the focused intensity of someone preparing for battle. The months of preparation had transformed him too, not just physically, though he had filled out with better nutrition and the confidence of pursuing his dreams, but in bearing. He moved through the kitchen with the authority of someone who knew exactly who he was and what he was creating. "The first guests will arrive in an hour," he said, but his voice carried excitement rather than anxiety. "The team is ready. The mise en place is perfect. Everything is exactly as we planned." "Almost everything," Maya corrected gently. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a small brass plaque, its surface polished to mirror brightness. "I had this made for the kitchen entrance. I thought Sonia should be properly acknowledged as co-founder of this vision." Arjun read the inscription aloud, his voice catching slightly. "In memory of Sonia Mehta, who taught us that every dish carries love, and love shared multiplies infinitely." For a moment, the busy kitchen fell silent. Maya watched as Arjun's team, a carefully selected group of cooks who had been chosen as much for their passion as their skill, gathered around the plaque. These weren't corporate employees following standardized procedures. They were artisans who had been trained to understand that cooking was storytelling, that every plate was an opportunity to create connection. "She would have loved this," Arjun said quietly, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "All of it. The chaos, the hope, the way you've let us build something that honors tradition while embracing possibility." "She did love it," Anika said, with the matter-of-fact certainty that had become her trademark. "I dreamed about her last night, and she was so happy she was dancing in the spice room. She said to tell you both that love shared becomes legacy, and legacy shared becomes family." The words hung in the air like a blessing, and Maya felt something settle in her chest, a peace she hadn't known she was seeking. Over the past months, as she had worked with Arjun to create this restaurant, she had discovered something her business school education had never taught her, that the most sustainable competitive advantage wasn't efficiency or scale, but authenticity. Food that told genuine stories, served by people who understood their purpose, created loyalty that couldn't be replicated by corporate formulas. "There's something else," Maya said, pulling a second envelope from her briefcase. "I've been thinking about expansion, not the kind we've done before, opening identical locations in new markets, but something different. I want to create a network of flagship restaurants, each one partnered with a local chef who has a story worth telling. Your success here isn't meant to be duplicated, it's meant to inspire others to find their own authentic voice. Arjun studied the proposal, his expression cycling through surprise, understanding, and growing excitement. You're talking about revolution, not evolution. I'm talking about remembering why we started cooking in the first place, Maya replied. About building an empire that creates rather than consumes, that honors rather than erases. The first guests were arriving, their voices creating a gentle hum of anticipation in the dining room. Through the kitchen's service window, Maya could see the faces of people who had come not just for a meal but for an experience, the chance to taste food prepared with intention and served with story. "Places, everyone," Arjun called, and his team moved into their carefully choreographed dance. But before the evening service truly began, he paused beside Maya, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing what this could become before I had the courage to imagine it myself." Maya watched as Anika positioned herself at her designated corner of the kitchen, notebook open, ready to document every detail of their first service. The child had become the restaurant's unofficial historian, the keeper of stories that would ensure their success remained rooted in purpose rather than mere profit. "Thank you," Maya replied, "for teaching me the difference between building an empire and building a legacy." As the kitchen erupted into the controlled chaos of service, Maya found herself thinking about that stormy night 3 months ago, when chance and weather had brought together two strangers who didn't know they needed each other. The rain had stopped that morning, but the storm had changed everything, washing away the barriers between worlds, revealing the essential truth that authentic success was measured not in quarterly reports, but in the connections created, the stories honored, the love shared across every table. Outside, Mumbai continued its eternal dance of ambition and tradition, but inside the restaurant that bore Sanya's blessing and Arjun's vision, something new was being born. The radical idea that business and soul could coexist, that profit and purpose were not mutually exclusive, and that sometimes the most important recipes couldn't be standardized, only treasured, shared, and passed along with the kind of attention that turns ingredients into inheritance. The storm had ended, but the real weather was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.